We are back. I'll tell you what, every time that we go a week in between episodes, it feels longer and longer and longer. We were just with you 6 days ago, but it feels like it's been too long. Welcome in, everybody. It's our first episode of 2025. Give a cheer. Give yourself a round of applause. You made it through the first 2 days of 2025. Congratulations to you. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by our friends at Rebich Investments. They are keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more information on Rebich Investments, you can just go to the website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can call them during normal business hours. 814-734-3433 is the number to call. 814-734-3433. It was a great Christmas for all of us and a great new year too, and it was a great new year for this man who's got some tan in the face. Mr. Nick Artman joins us back on the pod, my friend, after a great Disney vacation.
Man, you talk about, it feels like forever, and it's been 6 days for you. It's been like 20 for me. I was telling Isaac before we hit go, I said, I got to knock the rust off. I got to start doing some jumping jacks or something like that because I'm feeling a little rusty today. But no, man, it was an amazing trip. It's been a crazy few weeks. We had the trip to Disney with the kids, which is always fun and exhausting at the same time. Come home, Christmas Eve. So then we have Christmas Eve and Christmas. Day after Christmas, we hit COVID. So then we were gone for a week with sick. So man, it's been touch and go in the Artman household for the last week. So
hey man,
free of quarantine today and back on top of the world, my friend.
You know this as well as I do, man. When you have kids, there's no healthy. You just try to stay above the Mendoza line. That's all you can ask for.
Listen, I always say the worst part about when one of your kids gets sick, because we got sick in Disney too, and it's like when one kid, picks up the flu, right, starts getting, sick, you just, it's like a ticking time bomb, because it's not an if everybody else is going to get it, it's when. So it's like, it's got to make its way through the whole house. Yeah, you're not lying.
No, and look, I'm just happy that you're okay and you're out of it now. We're at home on this Thursday night. Glad to have you in. We'll try to be back in the studio next week. The weather not really being great either. It's crazy. It's eerie. We get 5 feet of snow over Christmas. Nick was lucky enough to miss that. Then it all clears up. We have a green Christmas, and now we've got another foot on the ground again. So hopefully you're enjoying some hot chocolate on this Thursday night with us. And if you're a fan of Notre Dame, shout out Bob Shreve. You're a pretty good fan, pretty good spirits tonight after their win over Georgia. We're going to be talking about Penn State and Notre Dame coming up in just a little bit to get the midpoint of our show cooking when they meet in the semifinals a week from today. But we want to start with some high school basketball talk. We got a live guest joining us in just a moment. But, Nick, as we roll through the season, a lot of these teams are starting to get to the 10, 11, 12 games played mark, maybe a little less if some teams have been in holiday tournaments. And I think one of the things we're starting to see is some separation. I've actually been surprised. And, we haven't really been able to look a lot into the Mercer County teams. There are a lot of teams kind of clustered up, if you will, in Region 1 and Region 4 on the boys and girls side. But I'll tell you what, when you look at Region 5, 6, and 7, specifically Region 5 and 6 in boys and girls, there really are about 1 or 2 teams that have really shined early, if you will. And then it's just kind of a mix of everything. I'm curious to get your thoughts early in the season because we do have some teams that are rising to the top on the boys and the girls side. But are you surprised this early that we're seeing a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of separation this early in the season when it comes to records?
No, I don't think so, because I think this is about the time of year where you want to start seeing that separation. I mean, want as an analyst, and I'm kind of looking at teams and figuring out who we want to talk to and talk about and starting to see those stories. I'm a big storyline guy, so I love finding those stories. You guys had Michaela Presser-Palmer on in one of the last episodes. If you missed that, go back and check it out. It's a phenomenal episode. Her story is incredible. Brooke Probilski is doing amazing things. Like, there's just a lot of really great stories to come out of Erie. So no, I'm not necessarily surprised, and I can't say that there's a team that I'm really surprised at yet this year. I mean, you have the McDowells and the Eries of the world who are playing really well in Region 7. Region 6, Warren and Franklin seem to be the two on top of there battling it out. Region 5, you have Sharon, who always seems to be out in front, but the rest of that region is pretty much wide open. Region 4 is where I think it gets exciting. Girard is looking like champions again this year. I mean, dominating on the paint, 64 They're averaging 64.2 points a game, and the defense is stepping up as well. So I can't say that there's anyone that I'm too surprised about, but I do think this is about the point of the year where you want to see and you're going to see that separation.
Yeah, when you talk to Gerard, I think you're talking about Region 6. I know they're easy to get mixed up, but that's
I was
still
looking at last year's. I was looking at last year's. I'm sorry. I had last year's standings pulled up.
The horrible thing about the region classifications. And I agree with you. I think when you look, first of all, at the girls' side, right now you look at all of District 10, and there's only two undefeated teams left. Wilmington sitting there in Region 1 at 8-0. They've been really, really good defensively this season. Yep. Then Northwestern, of course, at 9-0, and Michaela Presser-Palmer, who, if she's not going to score 20 and 10 every single game, it's a bit of an anomaly. I think on the girls' side, what will intrigue me the most is how Region 6 plays out. Brooke Przbilski, we talked about her with Harbor Creek. She went over 1,000 points last year. She's averaging via max preps almost 15 points a game this season. Fairview continues to play well, though, and I think what will be intriguing to me down the stretch of the season is, can Harbor Creek's offense outpace Fairview's defense? This Tiger team, Aaron Garrity's squad, lost only one senior last year. They're one of the best defensive teams in all of District 10. In fact, their defensive stats may argue that they are the best defensive team in all of District 10. That'll be interesting to see on the girls' side. Then I think on the boys' side, and you mentioned Region 6 with Gerard there in Fairview, Mark Schreier, I think I'm pretty good friends with Mark. Him and I text back and forth every so often. And, you know, he admitted to me at the beginning of the season it's going to be a work in progress. We're not sure how well we're going to be able to play. Well, this Yellow Jacket team's now 5-1. And the thing that's impressed me the most is they're scoring the basketball, 63 points over a stingy Iroquois team. They put up 77 on Conneaut. Their only loss of the season was to a Meadville team that is, at least in my view, probably the most consistent team in all of District 10 right now, sitting there at 7-1 in Region 7. So I think when you look at the boys' side, there's a little more separation right now. Not that it's going to be the same moving forward to the season, but I think you see Girard, Fairview, and Region 6 are really the class of that region. Region 7 is all about Meadville, McDowell, and Prep, not to exclude Erie High, but you know those three teams are really the ones that you have to look for. And of course, they all this season are playing in different classifications, right. Cathedral Prep moving down. And then you look at Region 5, and that's where we bring in our live guest tonight, because if there has been a team this season, I don't want to say has been the most surprising, but the most improved after a few years of struggle from the Fort Leboeuf boys basketball team, this Bison team, they are rolling. They are 7-1. They won their first 7 games of the season. And this offense, my goodness, they've changed almost in the span of a year. They score the basketball at will. They're stingy on defense, and they force a lot of turnovers. And they are led by a longtime head coach in District 10 into the college ranks, Mike Coletta, who's joining us from his home. And after a crazy day of work, Coach, we thank you for joining us. You are busy as always, but happy you're spending a few minutes with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Coach, man, where do we start? 7-1 to begin the year. You know, you've been around District 10, right? You coached Northwestern for 6 years. You were an assistant with Gannon for a year. You've been around the block when it comes to D10 basketball. Have you surprised yourself at all at the way that your team has started the season? And what do you think's just been the key to the success so far for the Bison sitting there at the top of Region 5 currently?
You know, I think that maybe the record might surprise some people. I knew we were going to be in a lot of close games this year. The main thing that I knew this summer, because we played a lot this summer, we probably played 25, 30 games, is we were going to play hard and we were going to compete. You know, I think that Fort Leboeuf kind of has a, you know, track record of maybe not winning and being successful in basketball. So I thought it was important this summer that we play a lot. We went to Navy team camp. We went to Penn State Barron team camp, and we just competed. And I think that over time we found out that if we compete, we play hard, we defend, and we play, you know, with our style, we could be successful in games. Now, whether or not we were going to win them, you know, that was going to come down to execution at the end of the games. But I thought we had a chance to be competitive.
Was there a point at the start of the season when you just knew? Because I know we're still early in the year. You've only played 8 games. I get that. But I feel like coaches, and I'm sure you've been a part of teams like this too at Northwestern in the tenure that you had there again, and where there's an early point of the season where you just know, like you hope that your team is going to be there. You hope that they can be competitive, but then there's a game where you're like, all right, we got it. Has there been that game so far this year, or that point in the season where you knew early on, like, okay, we're going to be a level above even where I thought we would be?
You know, I thought our 2 wins right before Christmas, going to Warren and going to Franklin, those are 2 really well-coached teams, 2 really talented teams, and we were able to play in games there, and they were close games, and we were able to get over the top of them too. Down the stretch at Warren, we were down 6 or 7, and we just kept battling. We got a good win there by 2 points. They had a shot at the buzzer. I mean, they could have went either way. And then we got to go to Franklin that same Friday after playing Tuesday. And, it kind of showed some mental toughness, being able to go onto the road to those two places and be able to get wins there. It was really good going into Christmas, and then gave us the opportunity to get better over Christmas break.
Coach, let me jump in here for a second because, I was telling Isaac before we brought you on that I had to knock the rust off, but I didn't, I had the wrong standings up when I'm looking at we were talking about it earlier, right? And the reason I had the wrong standings up is because I wanted to kind of just get your thoughts on this. Last year, Fort Leboeuf, bottom of Region 7, sitting at 1-11 in league, 7-15 overall. But then when you jump to this year, we're already, you guys are 7-1 to start the year. In your mind, what's been the biggest difference in the team between last year's season and the success you've seen so far this year?
I think it was just, going 1 year more with like what we were trying to do. Last year was my first year. So, just getting kids accustomed to how we wanted to build it in our culture. And really, it's all on the players too. Like they committed. I mean, I could tell them everything in the world that I want them to do, but I have 11 juniors and seniors that committed to each other and decided like this summer they were going to work hard. They were going to come to open gym 4 times a week. They were going to play in summer league. So really it's all a credit to them. I mean, I could say whatever I want. The players could say, no, we don't want to put into that and do it. But these 11 kids, they're great kids. And, we play 9, 10, 11 kids. Like we play fast. And all of them probably would like to play more than they do. But they're unselfish and they're committed and they cheer their teammates on when they're in. And it's one of the greatest groups of kids I've ever coached. I mean, they just really care about winning. They're unselfish and they just do a lot of great things for each other.
Yeah, Coach, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, I think that second year, I agree with you, is so important. You're implementing your system and things like that, and your players are getting used to you. And like you said, you've had that time to kind of maybe gel and grow as a team. What's been that one thing that maybe you tweaked from last year to this year as in your coaching strategy?
We play a little bit faster this year. We're a little bit smaller than we were last year. Last year we had a few big kids, that could contest shots and rebound. We weren't as guard oriented. This year we are. We probably have like 6, 7, 8 kids that are really good athletes. We're able to pressure and press the entire game, and we're in good shape. So a little bit. I mean, we played a little fast last year, but we're playing faster this year, and it's also we're playing schools our size this year. So it's a little bit harder. When you're doing, you'd like to play a certain way, but then you play Erie, McDowell, Prep, and Meadville, and it's hard because you just don't have the depth of players that they have. But it's nice this year. We're playing schools our size, and we're able to play that way.
Yep.
Coach, you mentioned you rotate a bunch of guys in, and I think that's something that we've seen early on in your season is the depth. But to have the depth, you have to play fast. And I think if you look at 2 specific players, your seniors, Carson Pepe and Hunter Villa, who were big players last year on offense, it seems like they've taken a next step, at least from our point of view. I've gotten a chance to watch you guys once earlier this season, and it just seems like they have a renowned sense of confidence, even more so than what they were last year. What about those 2 in particular allow the team to function as well as they do, if you will, just those 2 seniors in particular?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the first thing that's nice is this is their 4th year starting. So they've been through a lot of games. They've had a lot of losses their first 3 years. So they're battle tested. They're mentally tough kids. But the best thing is if you came into one of our practices and you watched us practice, you would say, and you didn't know, you're like, who are those 2 kids? They're practicing hard as anybody. You would think they were the 10th, 11th, 12th man on the team that's just trying to get some playing time. But they do a great job just setting the tone for practice of elevating all the younger kids, the other kids with them, just making each other better every single day. And they've become great leaders. They've made everyone around them better, and I think they've gotten a lot of confidence. This year, they started out good, and they're seniors now. They've been through it. They were successful in other sports. And I think they're just confident now. They know they can score and they can lead a winning team.
Coach, let's talk about the classification you play in, because it's easier to list the teams that are not in your 4A class than the teams that are. And you've been part of the realignment before. You understand what it is every other year, but you look now at 4A and there's 17 teams. I don't have to tell you that, but I think you understand the magnitude. You play in Region 5, so you're not going to get a lot of looks at the Region 6 teams that will be part, a lot of which, of your bracket come March of 2025. What is the message that you have to tell your team? What is the key for you as a coach to be able to pace your team well, knowing that you're, regardless of what your record is at the end of the season, you're going to have to go through a gauntlet in Class 4A?
Oh yeah, the playoffs. I mean, they're going to be unbelievable. I tell our guys, obviously we got to go one game at a time. We got to make sure we can make it there first before anything. But I mean, you look at all three leagues, like any score any given night wouldn't surprise me. If one team beats another team, I tell my guys that every single day. I go, anyone's going to beat you any night if you don't come, and you're ready to play. So you better be ready to play because, anyone else's best is better than your okay. But it's going to be competitive. We scrimmaged Fairview. They were a really good team. I've watched a bunch of other teams just on crossover film. I mean, all those Erie County teams are really good. The Mercer County teams, we have Slippery Rock coming up Saturday. They got a great big player that we're going to have to deal with. There's the 4A's real balance. And then, on top of that, you got Cathedral Prep in there too. So, I mean, there's a lot of good teams. It should be great for fans in the playoffs and probably real stressful for teams and coaches.
Do you like that as a coach? Because I know it's not in your control, right? I know it's not really something that you can make a decision on unless you choose to play up. But would you prefer the situation that you're in where you're going to probably have to win 3 or 4 games to get to the District 10 championship? What do you feel like as a coach, your opinion, with just having that many teams in 4A in a district?
I personally think it's awesome. I mean, when I played at Northeast and we were AAA, and it was kind of similar to what Quad A is now. There was, you would have to go through a Strong Vincent, Franklin, General McLean, Warren, Oil City. Like, I just think it's really cool. I mean, you get whoever wins the District 10 championship in 4A this year, they're going to have earned it. I mean, because every game will be tough.
It's like the college football playoff.
Right. It really is. It really is.
You wonder too, and maybe we can have this conversation a different day, but Nick and I think Jonathan too, were talking on this on previous podcasts, is that there's 17 teams. They should just take 16 teams. Why not?
And just play.
and just play
so
play the whole
bad for
thing.
that one team that got left out though. That one team, I'd be like,
or you just have a first 4-esque play-in, right, for the 16th seed. But I guess that's nor here nor there. That's a while away. Mike Coletta, head coach of Fort Leboeuf boys basketball, joining us. Coach, we've mentioned how long you've been in the District 10 scene and, of course, the college scene as well with your year at Gannon. And so I think you understand how this game has grown and evolved. Take me back to, when you played at Northeast, and now when you're, in your coaching years at Northwestern and now all the way up to Fort Leboeuf. How has the game in Erie County changed since you started playing, and what's been the key to strategy, maybe compared to when you first started to where you are now?
I think now there's just more kids that are skilled. Like bigs, back when I played, I mean, it sounds crazy. I graduated in 2004, but like big kids were post players. If you're above 6'4", you usually played in the post. Guards were guards. But now everybody's skilled. A lot of kids are playing year round. No matter what size you are, you can dribble, pass, and shoot. And I mean, I think the play is elevated. I feel like there's kids aren't as big as they used to be. Maybe it's because I was smaller back then, but I definitely think it's more skilled now. And I think every year it's getting better and better.
Yeah, I think you can see that. Certainly, I think there are so many coaches, and we've talked about on this podcast a lot too, that there are so many coaches now that get the best out of their players. I think coaching specifically is as good as it's ever been. I don't know if you can agree or attest to that, Mike, but it just seems like too, the coaching depth is there. And for you, it means that night in, night out, you just have to play your best, quite literally.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I played for an awesome coach and Tom Pyle, and he's still helping out at Northeast. I coached with Brian Schultz at General McLean. He's a great coach. But, I mean, you can just go down the line of all those 4A teams you talked about. They all have great coaches. Pat Flaherty, Coach Schreier you were talking about, Steve Rigg. I mean, you can go – the list is on and on and on. I can list them all. But, yeah, every single night you better be well prepared, well scouted. And if you're not, the other coach is going to, take advantage of whatever you weren't prepared for. So, the coaching's outstanding.
Coach, I got one more for you before Nick ends with a fun one before we let you go. Still plenty of games left, right? You've got one coming up on Saturday and then a couple of home games before you hit back on the road again. What's going to be the key for Fort Leboeuf to continue doing what they're doing and keep the mojo going into Game 9?
We got to take care of the basketball. That's been the one thing in games. We do a pretty good job turning other people over, but sometimes we give the ball right back to the other team. So, we got to take care of the ball. We got to defend a little bit better than we did the other night and communicate and just do all those little things that, you're going to be in close games. Do you make your foul shots? That's another thing we got to get better at. Make your foul shots, take care of the ball, make sure you're getting good shots and communicating on defense. Those are huge for us.
Well, Coach, let me wrap us up with just kind of a fun one. I didn't do my research on this, so this may fall really flat really quickly, and if so, I got to pivot. But I'm looking at the vowel in your last name. I'm looking at the flag over your shoulder.
Yes.
And we're coming off the holidays here, so I got to ask from Paisan to Paisan, what's a better holiday, Christmas Eve or Christmas?
It's probably Christmas Eve in our cult. I mean, we're pretty, yeah.
Absolutely, it's Christmas Eve.
Okay, so follow-up question to that, because I married into an Italian family. My wife hates Italian food, but I'm a huge fan. Yeah. What is the Christmas Eve spread at the Coletta household before Santa comes?
So you always have the lasagna there, and bacala is a big thing. Now, like, my family's not huge fish, but they always used to, my grandparents would always make it the bacala, all the different fish, and you always have lasagna, meatballs. I mean, everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what is it? Everything.
Yeah, it doesn't. And when do you eat? Whenever you want. It
right,
comes
the whole
out
day.
It comes
Even
out
if you're not hungry, you still need to eat.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I wish I grew up in an Italian household. I missed a damn ton, that's for sure. Hey, Coach, first and foremost, congrats on the great start to the season. It's been wonderful talking to you, and hopefully continued success and best wishes through the rest of the year. I can't wait to see what Fort Leboeuf does in 2025.
I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. Head coach Mike Coletta of Fort Leboeuf boys basketball. He's great. That was great. I'm really frustrated. I feel like I missed out on 25 years of great Italian food.
Listen, the reason I asked the question is because I've said it for years that in an Italian family, Christmas Eve is better than Christmas. Christmas Eve, or Christmas Day is great. You have the presents, but like food-wise, Christmas Eve, man, he was talking about his family growing up. My grandfather was from Italy, came through Ellis Island during those years, and we had, there's two things. One, you're going to eat a lot of food, and two, everybody's just going to be yelling at each other for no reason. But it sounds like a terrible experience, but man, there's nothing like it. It's kind of changed as we've gotten older. My relatives have kind of moved apart a little bit, but that's one that we still try to keep the magic going. But listen, there's a reason why I look the way I do.
Hey, same, man. I wear black on the show for a reason. It's about the only slimming thing that I've got. People wonder why I wear a pirate shirt on January 2nd, 2025. It ain't because they signed Juan Soto, that's for sure. And I love, too, the lasagna. And the lasagna is the number one thing on my wife's family as well. Lasagna, they're a big fan of Bourgeois. I don't know if you've ever had that, like the fucking flat steak and the sauce. Oh, I tell you what, man.
I made a Bourgeois. Oh, never mind. This isn't a recipe show. I made a Bourgeois the other day. I smoked it first and then wrapped it and braised it. Oh my gosh, it was. Oh gosh, now I'm just hungry.
Up next on Artman's Kitchen, we. This is the content. This is the content you all sign up for, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for letting us go off on Italian food for a bit. Hey, I think Rebich Investments likes Italian food. That's why they're the best financial guidance in town. Rebich Investments, proud sponsor of our show. They keep financial guidance simple. For more information, you can head to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or simply call their number during business hours. The number to call, 814-734-3433. Again, 814-734-3433. Please, by the way, in the comments, let us know what's better food-wise, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Maybe we'll put that as a poll question for Friday as we get ready.
You don't even have to be Italian. Just tell us, what are your holiday?
Oh, yeah.
What's your favorite holiday dish?
Right. Favorite holiday dish, your favorite holiday movie, because apparently on last episode I bombed the holiday movie special so bad. I didn't realize there were more than 2 Home Alones, but that's another conversation for another day.
I think there's 3 now.
No, apparently there's 6. I don't know. Wayne Bradford did a really great job of educating me on that. I'm sure he's watching this podcast and will be laughing at me when we do our Friday episode coming up tomorrow. All right. Let's talk college football, Nick Artman. In case you missed it earlier today, Notre Dame beating Georgia 23-10, the final score, another lopsided playoff win. The Irish are moving on to face the team that we focus on here, the Penn State Nittany Lions, in the college football playoff semifinal. I will say this, for those of you who follow me on social media, today was my first day at Gannon University. I'm pleased to announce I didn't set the office on fire, so that's a good thing. Now, in addition to Taylor Brown, who's just a marvelous individual and does so many great things at Gannon, the other person we have in the office is probably the GOAT, in my opinion, in sports information, and Erie. Bob Shreve does such a tremendous job. He's been doing this for decades at both Edinboro and Gannon. And I think our working relationship to start off with has been really splendid. But I am concerned. That next Thursday, that working relationship is going to take a hit. And Bob, if you're listening to this, I plan on politely avoiding you all day next Thursday, because it is going to be a heck of a game between the Irish and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Nick, I want to get your thoughts, though, first on Penn State's victory over Boise State back in the quarterfinal a few days ago, because, there's a part of me that feels like Penn State hasn't played their best game yet. There's another part of me that feels like this is the best we're going to get from Penn State. Is it too early to overreact to the way that they struggled to move the ball at times? Or do you think it was just a coaching mishap? And we say this in a 17-point win. I just don't know if they played their best game yet.
I don't know that it was a mishap on Penn State's offense or just a showing up of the Boise State defense, because I think this was the most impressive Penn State game that I've watched this year, and not because they blew out Boise State or maybe there wasn't a standout player, but this was the first, I think, complete game that I've seen from Penn State in a long time. So the offense, to answer your question, I feel like I always pivot away from your question. The answer to your question, I don't think the offense was slowed because of something they weren't doing. I think they took whatever Boise State would get them. I think it was just more of a Boise State defense showing up. I think when you look at Kaytron Allen, I know he had a great game. I think it was against Oregon, but breakout game for Kaytron Allen here, 17 carries for 134 yards. That 58-yard touchdown run by Nick Singleton, like when I look at that, like that's letting me know that their offense is working, but those are those plays that you have to hit to beat a team like Boise State.
I look at the way the Penn State's played the last two games, and the concerning thing for me is, we had T. Frank Carr on this show a few weeks back. I know you do a lot with him on our other show on this podcast network, Flagship City Sports Talk, and maybe we'll try to have him back next week when Penn State plays. And the one thing that he was saying with Drew Aller was that he felt like in the Big Ten championship game, him throwing the ball at will was more game plan specific than what it was, not the trust that they had in Drew, but more so they just felt like they had to throw the ball to compete with Oregon, and clearly they did. The concerning part for me is if it has to be game plan specific, I don't feel like at this point yet Penn State, and I hate to use the word trust, but do they believe that Drew is capable of winning a game? He did have 3 touchdown passes last game, albeit 2 of them were to Tyler Warren, who made a couple of acrobatic catches. But I look at the passing game the last 2 games, and I think, okay, Tyler Warren's had under 100 receiving yards total in the last 2 games. He's had 10 catches. Then you look at the other receivers and the struggle that they have had to be able to bring things in. Really, anyone not named Amari Evans has not played very well in the playoffs so far. And when we transition and look at this Notre Dame game, Nick, what worries me is Notre Dame's strength is where Penn State's weakness is. They're very good defensively and against the run. Yeah. And so, Notre Dame is not going to be a team that, in my view, I look at as beating Penn State 31-30 or feeling like they need to score with Penn State. Their defense in the last 2 games has been incredible. They completely shut down Indiana. They shut down a Georgia team, albeit without their starting quarterback. But I just feel like if there is a game where Drew Aller is going to have to be Superman, this might be it. Not because it's a 41-40 sort of a game, but because Notre Dame's defensive line and their front 7, really dating back to the USC game, which I watched, they're scary. And it may not be an easy downhill sledding race for Allen and Singleton come next Thursday.
I like where you're going with that, and I agree with you. I think that's going to be the game. Is going to be Penn State's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. I'm not worried about Penn State's defense in this. I think they match up really well against Notre Dame's offense. But let me answer your question with a question. Do you think the problem is Aller? Because I don't see Aller making a ton of mistakes, but you're right. He hasn't necessarily had that game where, I'm going to put the team on my back and I'm going to ride them through this game. I actually want to go back and I want to look at the receivers and I want to say, okay, outside of Tyler Warren, because if you're a defensive coordinator, if you're Notre Dame, you're saying, okay, we're good at the run. So then to shut down this receiving game, we just got to shut down Tyler Warren because there hasn't really been. Harrison Wallace has been fine all year. Amari Evans as well, like you were talking about. But I want to see a receiver step up because I think Aller's doing the best he can with what he has. I think Warren is obviously the best tight end in the country right now in college football. So I think for them to win this game, I think it's going to be a guy like Amari Evans that's going to need to step up, and really kind of be that X receiver that they need to one up that defense. Now, On the running side of the ball, it's nice to see Penn State's rush offense really being where I think offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki wants it to be. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton both over 1,000 yards this year, averaging over 5 yards a carry. I think where you look at a team like Boise State where it's going to be all Ashton Genty over and over and over again, here I think once Katron Allen gets tired, okay, throw in Nick Singleton. Oh, Singleton needs a breather? Throw in Allen. And I think having that two-back system is actually going to help. I really like Penn State in this game, and I think it's going to come down to that rotation at running back and who's going to step up and catch the ball outside of Allen.
Irish opening is
Warren. Sorry.
No, Irish opening is a 1.5 point favorite. I would imagine that line will probably go down to a pick 'em. And if I had to guess, I think it'll probably be near even heading into the game. To me, I think the obvious question is the injuries. The star players for both teams, Jeremiah Love didn't really look great in the minimal time I think that he got in the game earlier today. Didn't really be a factor. How is Abdul Carter going to nurse himself back to full health? It seemed to me, and I'm no expert, Penn State doesn't give out injury info to anyone not named God, but I feel like they kept him out of the game more so as a precaution than as a he can't play. It seemed to me like if Carter had to go back into the fourth quarter for a game-sealing drive, he probably could have played. Now, whether that means that he's going to be good to go for next Thursday, who knows? But it will be intriguing. I do think the one thing Penn State's defense will need Carter for is that Riley Leonard can run. I think that's something that the Nittany Lions, Kevin Jennings could to an extent with SMU, but their offensive line was just a mess. Notre Dame's offensive line is much better, much more poised and composed, and you're not playing in front of 107,000 at Beaver Stadium. So I think that'll be something to look at as well. But Penn State, Notre Dame coming up next Thursday for the right to go to the national championship. And I think we all probably agree, not that we're going to talk about Ohio State and Texas, that whoever wins the Penn State Notre Dame game will likely be a severe underdog in the national championship game. Because, man, Ohio State is rolling through everybody, including the number one team in the world last night.
I would love to see a Penn State-Ohio State rematch for the national championship. I think that game would be lightning. Did you see, speaking of Abdul Carter, did you see the tweet that he put out today?
No, I didn't know.
This was so funny. Here, I'll pull it up as an overlay.
Yeah.
So this is the tweet that he put out today. This is no text, just Darth Vader in a Bacta tank, and it's led to a lot of speculation today. On X trying to figure out what the heck that means. And if you look at, I think it was Nick Saban on College Game Day yesterday asked James Franklin, like, what's the status? And he said what he could say, which was nothing, but he pretty much left it as like, if Carter's going to play, it's up to Carter. And I think it's just going to depend. I do think there is an injury there. I just think that, he's doing everything he can. And I think it's going to take a lot for him to sit out again in this game against Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I think the same for Jeremiah Love. I mean, you can dress both those guys. How much they're going to be able to play, who knows? But I think it's going to be hard for either of those guys to realistically be out completely, just in my view. So we'll see. Penn State, Notre Dame. We're going to be talking a lot more about that coming up next week, likely on Flagship City Sports Talk, as well as our Gem City Sports Podcast. And who knows, our podcast is going to be where our normal time slot is taking place during the game. So, I don't know, maybe watch party. Who knows? Second half watch party. We'll find out. We'll figure it out. We got plenty of time until then.
Let's go crash T Frank show. We'll go.
T Frank is much too good for us on that. All we can do is cheer. We are the cheerleaders of what would be that. We are not the analyst. Well, I guess we do analyze, just not to that extent for Penn State football. All right, hey, we're going to get to some NFL New Year's resolutions in a second. This is going to be a fun segment, so stick with us. Before that, though, of course, our show, as always, brought to you by Redbush Investments. Hey, if you haven't checked them out today, what are you doing? Make sure to do so. They keep financial guidance simple. If you want more information, head to their website, www.redbushinvestments.com, or you can simply call 814-734-3433. Again, 814-734-3433 today. By the way, speaking of high school basketball, just got the stats. Northwestern's now 10-0. They beat Northeast 54. I believe it's a 54-28. Michaela Presser-Palmer, another great game for the Wildcats. A ho-hum, 33 points for MPP. So Northwestern now 10-0 on the season as they get to double-digit wins. All right, we thought with it being January 2nd, with the new year just happening, with our first show of 2025, we would do a little fun segment called New Year's Resolutions. We all have one. Whether they stick or not, it remains to be seen. I think I saw something that like 90% of people's New Year's resolutions fail by the second Friday in the month of January. So we will make our predictions before that day comes.
Ours might fail by then too. We'll see.
They might, but luckily for us, we're not the ones who are doing them. We're just simply picking them. We're going to do New Year's resolutions for the Bills, Browns, and Steelers. Nick and I have one resolution for all three of our local teams, and we're going to start with the team that needs a lot of luck in 2025, and that would be the team that is an 18-point underdog on Saturday against the Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns. And we'll start with you, Nick. Cleveland Browns need a resolution for 2025. What is your resolution for Cleveland this season?
This one's a little on the nose and maybe the most obvious, but I don't see how you can really ask or ask for a change in any other way. In 2025, the Browns need to find a starting quarterback. Now, I don't have a solution for them because I think it's too early. When we need to see what's coming out here in the offseason. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that. But the Browns' resolution coming into 2025, this 2025 year, is to find a starting quarterback. And listen, I like the experiment with Watson. You know, I give it to Browns brass when they say, okay, hey, we need to break this mold. We need to get out of this factory of sadness. So let's go all out on a guy that was looking like an NFL MVP before all this stuff happened. Fine. You did it. It went over like the Titanic. Pivot. Find something else, because this isn't if you bring back Deshaun Watson as the only option coming into the preseason in 2025, stick a fork in them, because I think not only is the team not going to be behind them. We've seen some rumblings about this, but I also just think the fan base. You might as well just pack up and move to Brook Park.
Oh yeah, the fan base is gone.
Right. So whether Sam Darnold hits the market, I've seen Fields tied to. Although I don't think Fields leaves Pittsburgh, I see Field ties to Cleveland. Whether it's the draft, find a starting quarterback. He doesn't have to start week 1. You know, maybe you still try to figure this Watson thing out, but man, you better have a secondary option that you pull that ripcord to quickly.
You and I think alike, maybe great minds think alike, because I have something very similar for my Browns resolution. I think they need a starting quarterback, no question.
Yeah.
And when I hear of the Deshaun Watson reworked deal that came out just a short while ago, I get worried, because, again, it sets the table that Deshaun's likely going to be back. So for my New Year's resolution, I think I'm going to speak directly to Jimmy Haslam, the man who was trying to buy a $2.4 billion stadium in Brook Park and move the team out of the city for the second time in their franchise history. My resolution for Jimmy Haslam is this: man, put your ego aside.
Yeah, get out.
Do you want to win games, or do you want to have, the crown jewel of what you thought was going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to Cleveland? I truly believe, and we've talked about this in the podcast, that it's not a Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Berry thing. I think their hands are tied. Jimmy Haslam is the man who is pulling the strings on this. He's the one that wanted Deshaun Watson. I imagine he is the one that announced that to Deshaun via phone or text or whatever, that he was going to give him the guaranteed money back originally when Cleveland apparently made an offer that wasn't an entire guaranteed deal. I think you look at this roster, and it's amazing to me, Nick, how a roster goes from ripe to sour when your starting quarterback struggles. This was arguably a top 5 roster in football last season when you look at the way their defense had been playing. Myles Garrett, of course, the DPOY from last season. Their secondary was playing well. JOK was, I thought, in my view, one of the best 10 linebackers in football. And the offense was rolling well, even without Nick Chubb and the injury that he sustained at the beginning of last season. But now you look at this team and you think, okay, the quarterback is in trouble. Maybe they found their number one in Jerry Jeudy, but they have to find someone to get him the ball. The rest of the receivers after that are fairly suspect, at least in my view. And the biggest problem that I have with the Browns is their salary cap. Because now you're in a situation where you have to get, in my view, a different quarterback. But if you pay for another quarterback, you can't really pay for anybody else. There's a lot of rumblings as to whether Myles Garrett should get traded. You're sitting there likely with a top 5 draft pick. And what do you do with it? If you don't draft a quarterback, should you trade it? Should you try to draft Travis Hunter? Should you try to draft Abdul Carter? For Cleveland, there are plenty of good options, but none of them sound good because you don't have your quarterback spot figured out. So I think if Jimmy Haslam puts his ego aside, admits the fact that, look, I screwed this up, we're going to keep Deshaun on the team, or, and basically say, hey, you're going to be on either long-term IR or you're just simply not going to play, and we're going to bench you, and we're going to deal with it and swallow the pride. I think that would do a lot with Cleveland fans, and that might get Cleveland on your side to build your new metropolis in Brook Park in 2027. So that's my resolution for the Browns. I think we have very similar ones. And, man.
Let me ask you this, because, I think there's a 99% chance in Watson is the starting quarterback week 1 next year. And you're right. Because of that contract, they don't have room to go out and get anybody else because they have some holes on that offense. They need a run game. The offensive line looks suspect this year. The defense wasn't playing as well as they could have been. So what do you do? I think the restructuring doesn't – I think a lot of people thought, he restructured. He might not be back next year. I'm not a capologist. In fact, I'm terrible at math. However, my understanding of the contract restructuring was more about after next year. They have an out after next year. So I do think you see one more year of Watson, but you make a great point. With that contract, it's going to be very hard to go out. Let's say Sam Darnold hits, 14-2, whatever they are now, 14-3 Sam Darnold and the Vikings. He hits the open market. I mean, they're not going to be able to afford a guy like that. So, what are you going to do? Go sign Aaron Rodgers? Oh, yeah, that's going to be great in a locker room, Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, I think they're going to be in a tough spot.
The problem that I have, though, with that rework contract, and you bring up a good point, but if you're Jimmy Haslam and you're Andrew Berry, why would you – I don't know. I just feel like Deshaun is going to be there for the long haul, in part because why would you then throw away next year too, knowing that you still have a decent roster so that you can maybe get out of the contract in 2026? Yeah. If I'm doing this, I'm ripping the Band-Aid off now. Yep. Right. I mean, if you legitimately think you have a roster that can win you a Super Bowl, I don't care the cap hit. You should have players that you can find to bring you success. I think Mike Hall's been a decent pick in the second round for Cleveland. There are other guys there waiting in the wings that could help you. If you really feel like you're a quarterback away, you're not going to defer essentially another year of suckage just so you can simply play for 2026. It doesn't make sense to me because your window for a Super Bowl, as we know, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, it closes after a few years. And so I think for Cleveland, the smart thing, just get rid of them now or cut your losses. It's going to cost you money, but it probably is better to rip the Band-Aid off at the end of the day. All right, that's the Cleveland Browns resolution. They got a long time to think about theirs too because they'll be done playing by Saturday evening at about 7:30 p.m. Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be playing on Wild Card Weekend. Not sure how long they're going to be playing past that. 2025 New Year's resolution, Nick Artman, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have gone into a tailspin.
I struggled with this one, trying to figure out, and not because I couldn't find one. Don't hear what I'm not saying, but just trying to find out, if I'm gonna, they're in the playoffs, so unlike the Browns, that it was a long-term resolution. The Steelers need a quick turnaround resolution, and I look at what they have, right? Because you could say, they need to go find a wide receiver. Yeah, okay. Well, you can't do that this time of year. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay, can't do anything there. So what can you do with what you have? And I look at this team, and early on in the offseason, Tomlin pretty much said, I want to zig while everyone zags. So they bring in Arthur Smith to be this run first, pound and ground. We're going to pay a ton of money into this defense, and we're just going to grind out these games. Okay, but that worked until your defense couldn't grind out these games anymore. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers' New Year's resolution for 2025 is to find some more consistency on defense. Obviously, they're still a top defense. Their defense still sits overall. They're the 11th overall defense right now, according to the AP, 7th in the rush, 23rd against the pass. And that 23rd defense or pass rating defense is what's been causing them problems. You look at their last 6 games, okay? Chiefs put up 29, no surprise there. Lamar put up 34. Eagles put up 27. Browns put up 27. The Bengals, who you have coming into town this weekend, put up 44. So you need to find this consistency. You need to find that identity back on defense, and you need to, you don't want to be the offense that passes the ball. You don't want to get on board in this passing league okay, well then you need to make sure that your defense can defend that passing league. And they started out really well, and we knew the end of the year was going to be a gauntlet for Pittsburgh. But if they have any hopes in the playoffs this year, they need to find that consistency again on defense.
You're not wrong, and you wonder how much the locker room talk, which seemingly via practice comments yesterday got resolved, at least internally, and it's not going to be talked about externally. A lot of the rumors around was that singular player was Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that is your prima donna safety that was supposed to be the saving grace to the back end for a Pittsburgh team that had struggled up until he arrived in the secondary slots. So we'll see. Right. Pittsburgh, I agree with you, needs to do better on defense, but I'm going to zag while you're zigging to quote Mike Tomlin. You mentioned the expensive defense, right? And for years, really throughout Mike Tomlin's entire tenure, and Bill Cowher's entire tenure for that matter, Pittsburgh has been reluctant to spend money on things not named defense. I don't have to mention TJ, Minkah, heck, Larry Ogunjobi's making almost $14 million against the cap. Cam Hayward, Patrick Queen, Alex Highsmith. Really, you look at Pittsburgh's offense and you say, boy, highest paid player on offense is Isaac Seumalo. What the heck? So my New Year's resolution for the Pittsburgh Steelers is to spend money on offense. We've seen this experiment. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked to the way you would like this season. And I understand they're sitting at, 10-6. They're going to be in the playoffs. But, you look now at the tough part of their schedule and how they haven't been able to maneuver through it. And you look and you say, any team that they play with a better starting quarterback, they haven't been able to beat. Russell Wilson terrorized defenses in his first few starts. What's he done since then? By the way, side note, I'm way off the Russ train again. I was on it for like 3 seconds and then I stopped at the next exit.
I thought that was going to be your resolution.
That's all. Well, wait till tomorrow's episode. We'll talk about bold predictions for 2025. But, you look at Russ, I don't think the answer. Who knows if Justin Fields is the answer, but he's a cheap quarterback too. And now you look at all your wide receivers as well who might be due contracts. Okay, the first question I have is, does George Pickens choose to hold out before he gets a big deal? Some of your older guys that you've signed, whether it's Van Jefferson or the Lod, who are going to kind of be in those no-man land areas. And then the big question is, what do you do with Najee Harris? Do you re-sign him? Do you let him go? You try to go with Jaylen Warren, but then after next year, you might be in the same position with Jaylen Warren. So I just think for Pittsburgh, you have to really go in on finding an offense that is not uber expensive, but is enough so that you can compete with these top tier teams. It was clear against Philadelphia, clear against Kansas City, abundantly clear against Baltimore on the road. You cannot compete with these offenses. You are not able to score 35 points a game consistently. They have this year, but not more than once or twice. And I think this is for Pittsburgh a sign that if you want to be a Super Bowl contender, you need a great offense. You can make the playoffs with what you have. You're not going to go very far in the playoffs without a great offense. So spend money on offense is my New Year's resolution for the Pittsburgh Steelers, although I don't think it's going to happen.
I had to go back and fact check you. Isaac Seumalo is the number one, the highest paid offensive player on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
He's got the highest cap hit. He's got the highest cap hit.
That is mind-blowing to me. And then you have the next, which is like, 12th on the list is Najee Harris. Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, I'm changing my resolution.
Yeah, I just it's amazing to me. And the young guys on offense can't stay young very long. Eventually, this has been my theory for years. You're due to pay them. So Pittsburgh, they better win a playoff game, because if they don't, this is going to be a huge, huge mess on Mike Tomlin's hands after it looked like he was a lock for Coach of the Year for 12 weeks. All right, how about the Buffalo Bills? They're locked into the 2 seed. I think it's probably a formality at this point that Arrowhead Stadium is going to be the AFC Championship site between the Bills and Chiefs, although we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. New Year's resolution, Nick, for the Buffalo Bills. What you got?
Usually resolutions are something that should be attainable, nothing too crazy, nothing that, you really can't achieve. You want to achieve this goal. However, I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, you got to shoot for the moon. And I think for the Buffalo Bills, their 2025 New Year's resolution is they need to win a franchise-first Super Bowl. They are them and the Minnesota Vikings are tied for the most Super Bowl appearances without an actual victory at 4. I think they want, and I think it is likely that they get their 5th appearance into the Super Bowl. Whether they win or not, I think that's a tough road. But I think the only thing that is on their resolution board coming into 2025 is to win a Super Bowl. This is the best Bills offense that Josh Allen has been a part of. I think I saw something like this was the highest scoring Bills offense ever, which is kind of crazy when you think about how I was worried about them at the start of the year, not having that X receiver, alpha receiver. They've passed the ball around. They've moved the ball around. Rushing is going everywhere. So everybody is feasting in this offense. I think this is a great, clear window for them to go out and win the Super Bowl. So I think it's Super Bowl or bust on their resolution board.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that my resolution goes hand in hand with that, but it's a little more nuanced than that because I think Buffalo needs to win a Super Bowl. I think in addition to winning a Super Bowl, they have to be able to get over their greatest hurdle, right? And there's one team that stood in their way. So I've always had this theory. I've said this for the last few years. I was in Kansas City when 13 seconds happened, right? And I feel like Sean McDermott, no matter what happens in the playoffs when he plays Kansas City, can't get that out of his head. They are not capable of getting over 2021. So with that, my New Year's resolution for the Buffalo Bills is to focus on nothing more than 12 seconds into the past. I really do believe this. I mean, when you look at the AFC, and maybe save for Cincinnati, who could potentially get in, and then you'd have a really interesting first-round matchup between the Bengals and the Bills. Yep. Is there really a team outside of the Chiefs that you think is beating Buffalo? No. And I think that's been the truth for the last 4 years. It doesn't matter whether you had Stephon Diggs, whether you didn't have Stephon Diggs, whether you had or you didn't have a running game. This Bills team has been one that has been able to beat, every single level of competition except Kansas City. And you look at the way last year ended with the debacle at the end of the game and not being able to find the end zone and having to kick a field goal to tie the game and Tyler Bass missing the kick to the 13 seconds to the just struggles that they've had in the playoffs against Kansas City specifically. I think Josh Allen has played a lot more free this year. And it's funny that I say free because he's limited turnovers, but I think there's a bit of a freedom to him where he doesn't feel like he has to force the ball. This to me is the year, and I know we've said it every year, but if you're Buffalo, the way that you have played this season, the success that you have had, and I think we all can agree the Chiefs, even at 16-1, don't feel as dominant. It may feel as inevitable, but don't feel as dominant that they have been. I think this Buffalo team knows they can go into Arrowhead and win. They've got the better roster. This season, they have the better quarterback. As I've said on this show, I would rather start my franchise with Josh than I would with Patrick Mahomes, and that's not because I'm a Bills fan. It's because he's more talented.
Sure.
And now you're in a situation where the only thing that you don't have an advantage in this game is coaching. So if Sean McDermott can ignore the 13-second game, I think Buffalo is going to go to the Super Bowl. I think they're going to win it. And so, I make an analogy. I'm a hockey guy, right? The Buffalo Bills are the Washington Capitals of the 2020s. Washington, for so many years, had loaded rosters, right? I mean, they were arguably the best team in the league for 5 years, and they couldn't get over the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Absolutely.
Lost to them multiple times in a row in the second round. Finally, 1 year, they get over the hump in 6 games against the tired Penguins team who had won back-to-back cups. What happens if they win the Stanley Cup? I legitimately think Buffalo's a 60-minute playoff win over Kansas City away from making and winning the Super Bowl. So that's my New Year's resolution for the Buffalo Bills.
Love it.
And we're going to find out in a few weeks because the playoffs begin starting at the end of next weekend, Nick. And we're going to be doing some playoff picks coming up next week as well on our Thursday and Friday shows, man. But what a season. It's second season it's going to be, that's for sure.
Looking forward to it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, by the way, speaking of shows, we got one more show coming up tomorrow. Wayne Bradford's going to join us tomorrow at 7 o'clock. We're going to pick our NFL Week 18 games. Plus, we are going to give a bold prediction for each NFL team in 2025. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to join us then. For Nick Hartman, I'm Isaac Petcash. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for being with us on the Gem City Sports Podcast.